What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review The Protege, starring Maggie Q, Michael Keaton, and Samuel L. Jackson. The movie opened wide today, and on the whole, I thought the movie was a slick, polished, and very sexy R-rated action flick with plenty of kick-ass action scenes and sexual tension. But more important to me, this is the latest action movie from director Martin Campbell, who is knocking at the door of turning 80 years old in 1 or 2 years, and yet he is still able to stay in the game making movies at this level with the energy and intensity of somebody who's basically 1/3 his age. And if you're unfamiliar with his name, Martin Campbell directed my 2 favorite James Bond movies of the last 30 years, GoldenEye and Casino Royale. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that on those 2 occasions, Martin Campbell saved the James Bond franchise right when the series appeared to be running out of gas. And who knows, maybe they'll bring him back for one more if the next Bond film underperforms. But before I get too carried away, I should emphasize that I don't want to oversell The Protege. Martin Campbell has definitely made some turkeys over the years, like the 2011 Green Lantern, and I have to admit that I've been a little worried about seeing so few reviews online in advance of the film's release. Usually that's an ominous sign when a movie has a very late embargo like that, especially one where there's basically nothing really to spoil in the movie, apart from 1 or 2 pretty satisfying plot twists. In any case, I thought the trailer looked cool as hell, and I'm an easy mark for R-rated genre films. They're a bit of an endangered species these days, as Hollywood leans into risk-averse PG-13 movies, so I decided to go to the theater and have a look for myself, and I'm very glad I did. While The Protege doesn't attempt to reinvent the action movie in any way, shape, or form, nonetheless, pretty much everything this movie attempts to do, it does well. Screenwriter Richard Wenk delivered a tight, economical storyline, while director of photography David Tattersall gives us one great-looking scene after another, no matter how gnarly or bloody the action gets, and on many occasions it does. That said, in spite of the gore and the blood, each shot looks fantastic. The colors are vibrant, the shot composition is pleasing to the eye, and there's zero of that shaky cam bullshit, giving us the chance to savor every little morsel of the action choreography. And what was interesting to me was how the movie seemed to steer away from the style of action that's been so popular lately in movies like the John Wick franchise or Atomic Blonde or Extraction. And I wouldn't necessarily say the movie feels like a throwback, but there's an elegance to the style of action that feels kind of James Bond adjacent. But what really made the movie work well for me was just how fucking cool and lethal Maggie Q can be when she decides to turn it on. Dressed in black and lean and lethal as a stiletto, she just looks awesome in the many action scenes where she carves a path through the henchmen of her adversary. Now I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on the plot itself, which was not the most interesting ingredient of the movie for me. The most interesting ingredient was watching Maggie Q and the great Michael Keaton delivering one great scene after another as they try and figure out whether or not they want to fight or fuck. And if that language is too coarse for you, then this is not the movie for you, because Keaton and Q, they use all kinds of delightfully filthy language during their elaborate dance of sex and death, in particular during a date scene that should rapidly become a fan favorite for action enthusiasts. Either that scene or the scene where their love-hate relationship finally explodes in delightful fashion, and what is easily one of the horniest fight scenes I can ever remember seeing. And Michael Keaton, he is just a joy to watch. He's so game to play the villain Rembrandt, and he's surprisingly convincing in his action scenes in spite of having been born way back in 1951. I've been watching Keaton my whole life ever since I saw Mr. Mom in the theater back in 1983, and I love how he's been keeping so busy as of late. He's also the one bad guy in the movie who can hang with Maggie Q without getting eviscerated in seconds. Whether she's outnumbered or getting shot to pieces or tortured, if she's within reach of anything that resembles a weapon, all hell breaks loose. It's funny, but now that I think of it, pretty much everyone in this movie is a bad guy. It's just a question of degree, like just how morally dubious their actions may or may not be. Maggie Q's character, Anna, she's the protege of a killer for hire named Moody, played by Sam Jackson, and as a team, they kill for money, and they're damn good at it. But they've got something resembling a code where they only accept assignments where they feel like the target has got it coming. But as Clint Eastwood famously said in Unforgiven, we all have it coming.
We all have it coming, kid.
But I love the chemistry between Jackson and Q, especially during the flashback scenes where we see how he saved her life as a kid and then raised her to be the ultimate badass, but she's not indestructible. This movie does not make the mistake of making her so unkillable that the movie turns into a giant snooze fest. She basically leaves pieces of her flesh behind in one scene after another and earns her badass stature many times over. And the movie also earns its R rating many times over, which, once again, kind of makes me an easy mark for this movie, where perhaps I'm willing to cut it some slack in some areas like the script. And don't get me wrong, the screenplay is perfectly fine and functional, but otherwise the screenplay is unremarkable. But as far as the rest of the cast goes, I like seeing Robert Patrick and Patrick Malahide in action, and if this movie enjoys some success, I would be totally down for watching more stories about Anna in the future. Maggie Q gave the part her all, and I think she more than holds her own as an action star. And one last thing I want to mention, which I hate even having to say, but these are the times in which we live, but the movie is blissfully, almost gleefully unburdened by any sanctimony or preachiness on the part of the filmmakers. I hate that saying something like that has to be the exception as opposed to the rule, but we live in strange and interesting times where ideology often eclipses art and entertainment. But I'll simply say the only agenda that this movie has is doing its best to keep you thrilled and entertained from start to finish. I had a really good time watching it, and if the laughs that I heard in my theater are any indication, a lot of other people in the theater had a good time too. And as I look at Martin Campbell's filmography, I'm reminded that his 1985 TV series Edge of Darkness is supposed to kick all kinds of ass, but I've never seen it, so I might have to take a look at that as well. But I think that's all I have to say, so if the trailer grabs you, definitely have a look. Thanks so much for listening to my rant. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button and be sure to subscribe. And if you want to talk more about action flicks, you can always find me on Twitter at Geekin' Out. Or if you want some more content in the short term, check out my podcast, Wrong Reel. But I hope everyone has a great weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.